Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to dive into the conversation in a moment. First, I wanted to remind you that the show notes and links mentioned on this podcast are on my website at lizasivekmarketing.com. That's Liza with a Z and Civic with an S. So, okay, let's get started.
Hello, magicians. This is Liza. I am here today with Clare Marshall, my writer friend. I am going to make her my BFF. She doesn't know this yet. So she writes young adult science fiction and fantasy. And, if you know me at all from a personal life or mentioned anything on these podcasts or in my marketing, you know that I'm a huge geek. I have lots of fairy stuff. I have lots of sci-fi stuff. And I even have a dog named Duke Skywalker. So I think that's pretty much outing me as a complete sci-fi fan. So we're going to talk to Clare about her writing and about how she can help other writers learn how to market themselves, because that's a very difficult area. Creatives don't like to market themselves. We don't always have a business mind. And, we always joke, getting artists to do anything is like herding cats. So we have to try to, find a way for people who are creative, whether it be marketing, writing, art, performing. We got to have a business mind. We got to know how to get ourselves out there because no one else is going to do it for us. So Clare, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what you do, where you're from, what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited. I'm in Canada. So if my accent throughout this gives me away, that's where I'm from.
It's not your accent. It's that you're so nice and polite. I apologize the entire time. Go ahead.
Well, we're not all nice, but thank you. And I'm sorry.
See that? I already love her. Okay, go ahead.
So I actually grew up in rural Nova Scotia on the Eastern Shore. But I live in Calgary now, in Calgary, Alberta. Growing up in rural Nova Scotia, I didn't have much TV. I had two channels, one that came in most of the time, and that was CBC, which is the national television station. And we only got dial-up internet when I was 13 and continued to have dial-up throughout the rest of my teen years. So I spent a lot of time reading, getting books from the library, and a lot of time writing. My parents really encouraged both me and my sister in our creative pursuits. So I would come home from school when I was a teenager and I would write books. I started writing my first real novel. I'm doing air quotes here, real novel.
Yeah.
One that wasn't just a very long story in a duotang binder. My first real novel, I started when I was 12 and finished when I was 15. And at that point, I was already researching publishing and publishers and how do I get published and what's all this about? And again, very encouraged by my parents to do all this research. And I was submitting to publishers being like, hey, I wrote this 150,000 word novel. and most of the time they were like, oh, you're so young and you wrote all this, and very nice, encouraging rejections, because, even looking back at that, it's my writing was not quite there, but I was learning, right? I went to university for journalism. I went to the University of King's College. Never really wanting to be a journalist, but encouraged to do journalism because it was a trade, and very much we were treated like real journalists, kind of just go out there and find a story. So that really taught me how to write to deadline and a lot of sort of useful, practical skills that I still kind of carry with me today. And it kind of also taught me how to talk to people and how to do a real interview and actually gain a rapport with somebody very quickly. Again, very useful skills for what I do now. Also on the other side of that, talking about gaining rapport with people, I'm not just a writer. I grew up being a musician as well. I'm a stereotypical Nova Scotian, you see. I play the fiddle and I step dance. And
I had no idea this. I'm planning on going there hiking when you guys open up again, and I had no idea that I need to bring tap shoes, and this is like, I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Tap shoes are given to you when you get off the airport, off the airplane at the airport. So I grew up actually performing with my sister at kind of local community events and some larger events as well. So I learned at a young age how to perform in front of people, and that, it's okay to put yourself out there. And if you make a mistake, then you just kind of continue on. And just sort of the beginnings of that platform that I would take with me when I would eventually write and publish my novels and take them across the country and sell them at trade shows, which is a whole thing that I also did. So in 2010, I started doing freelance publishing, professional work, anything to do with publishing. I was doing it for people. And in 2011, I was like, I'm going to start my publishing brand now. And since 2011, I've been writing about a book a year and publishing it and traveling around the country to trade shows pre-pandemic, selling my novels. So, I've had a pretty busy life.
Yes.
And the pandemic kind of
This
stopped.
is what happens when you don't let your kids watch TV. They become very well-rounded, creative individuals. Sorry, girls. I'm sorry to my daughters. No, they are actually creative, well-rounded individuals, but obviously, despite the fact that I let them watch all that TV. So, and this is fascinating because you took, I love stories like this. You took a bunch of different areas of your life and you wove them together into doing what you want to do. I never thought about learning journalism teaches you deadlines and things like that. And of course, that's, now that you said it, it's very obvious. If they teach you that in college, that's fantastic. And probably at that time, that was a good backup career. But I know for my journalist friends, maybe not so much now. Now, if you want to go journalism, you should have a backup career that pays. But it's, that changed more recently. But that's a skill set that a lot of people don't have when they go into writing, when they decide to be a writer. So you had that business edge and your parents encouraged you, which is wonderful on the creative side, like mine did. And we don't all have that, but they also said, hey, learn some skills. And, they didn't tell you to go be a carpenter or, doctor, but they said, go learn some skills that'll help you, which is great.
My dad,
go ahead.
My dad is a carpenter, actually.
I didn't say it was a bad thing. I think the trades are fantastic.
Yes.
He knows that you got to work hard. You got to have a skill set, right? No matter what you do, right?
Yeah.
So,
he had his own business as well. And that also played into, I think, my entrepreneurial drive. Because I would go with him to these flea markets and art markets, and he would sell his pieces there. And I would be like in elementary school, kind of helping him. And, we lived an hour and a half from the city. So we would get up at like 5 a.m. and drive in his truck for an hour and a half to get to Halifax. And then we would go have McDonald's breakfast, and then we would go, that was like the big treat. Yeah, and then we would go and sell. And so just watching him interact with people, and actually he made a thing and then he gets money for the thing. I liked that part. I like that part where he gets the money.
I think that's when I got into sales. It's like, oh, wait, I can make money by telling people to buy this. That's great. So that's fantastic. I mean, that's what an example. What a great way to see how people take their creativity. And so was he doing woodworking? Was that what he was selling? Yeah.
Yeah. So he would make furniture of a variety of types. I mean, he also did jobs, like he would go away and work on a site or a project, and then he would come back. That was after the flea market and art market days. But yeah, for furniture of all different types, some toy boxes, even some clocks that were shelves, like that kind of stuff.
I'm seeing, and this might just be because I'm a huge fantasy and sci-fi lover, but I'm seeing like where you might have gotten some of your ideas of fantasy and, you know, that kind of story where it's like, oh, and there was a woodmaker and they made little clocks and they made furniture, you can all be interwoven. It's all a bit, you know, of a lovely experience. And I think that's a wonderful way to grow up, to see someone actually making money with their art, even if it's a side gig. It's a very important thing if you're creative to see an example of. And again, we don't all have that growing up. So from all that wonderfulness, you then switched over to writing books and deciding to go out on the road and sell them. And what was some of your learning curve there? Because that's not easy when you've never done it before.
Yes, absolutely. So what kind of precipitated that was in 2013, a friend of mine kind of messaged me, and I have a lot of friends in Winnipeg. I really love Winnipeg. A lot of people kind of dunk on it, but if you're Canadian, you'll know. But I actually love Winnipeg. It's a creative place.
So you're okay.
It's a creative place with a lot of creative people in it. And so one of my friends in Winnipeg messaged me, and he was like, you should, we have a small convention here. Have you thought of like coming and visiting, and you can sell your books? And because of my experience, like with my dad, it wasn't that huge of a leap for me to be like, oh, like, I don't know if I could do that. I knew that I could do that. Even though I had to go from Calgary to Winnipeg to do that. And for those of you who don't know, that's like 2 provinces over, 2 provinces east from Alberta, because Winnipeg is in Manitoba. Little geography lesson for you.
There you go. Well, we'll be quizzing you all later.
So
yeah.
So that was my first convention that I did by myself. And, even though I had this prior experience, I was still pretty unprepared. For example, I didn't have a money lockbox to take my money in. I just had this mug that I had afloat, and I would just put money in this cup. I know. And I didn't have banners. I didn't have a tablecloth. So I just had this plain table with I think they gave you like a white tablecloth. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have anything else. So I took my scarf that I was wearing and I put that down. It was a blue. I was like, okay, this looks like a little bit better. But even just looking back, and I actually, I blogged about all of my experiences. So you can go back to this very first convention. There are pictures of what this looks like. It's just, I had 3 books at the time, and they're kind of scattered on this table. It's not very impressive. But at the time I was like, oh, I'm doing it. And that's how you have to start. You just have to start doing it.
Oh, right. You don't always know how to show up and market yourself, but you're out there and you're doing it, which is the most important thing for startups. Yeah,
exactly. So, when I got home, like I said, I decided, I'm going to blog about this. This is kind of interesting. And I blogged about some of the things that I learned. And I decided to keep doing that for every show that I did. So I started doing shows in 2013. I would do like 4 or 5 shows a year. So, that's only 4 or 5 blog posts. In 2016 was a shift. I decided that, like, if I'm going to do this trade show thing, I need to actually do this seriously. I was starting to get into some larger shows. I was starting to get into the Calgary Comic-Con, which is the 2nd largest Comic-Con or comic convention in this country, in Canada, where I live. So I was like, I'm stepping up my game because there are larger booths here. There are people who are taking this more seriously than I am. So I need to bring a bigger game. So in 2016, I was like, okay, what are all the things that I need to do to level up my display? And because I was also going to be, I knew I was going to be in a row with other authors selling their books.
And it's not going to do it anymore, huh?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, and one thing you should know is being a bookseller in a row with other booksellers, that's fine. You can meet people and it's really great for morale, but it can be very competitive as well because, the reader only has so many dollars that they're willing to spend on books. Now, not always. Sometimes people, when they go there,
it's more about the limit of the dollars that we have.
Yeah. And there are
a lot of books.
Yeah. And there are people who will spend lots. But there's competing attention as well.
Yeah.
And one bad apple does ruin the bunch. Like if they have a bad experience with one author in a row, then they're gonna back away from that and leave.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, I need to really show up and be the best that I can be, and just try and do my best to sell all these books. And so I thought more, I was more thoughtful about how I was arranging my books, not just like putting them flat on the table, but how can I add more height to my display? I was more careful about the objects that I brought, the props, shall we say. I got some fake flowers. I was like, that'll look nice. I bought a chest that I could put some books in, and just to add a little interest to the table, I got better tablecloths that were more on brand. I just started thinking bigger about the experience that a person will have when they approach my table.
You're talking about user experience. You're talking about attraction of your ideal client because you're telling them what's in the book without telling what's in the book, just as they walk by. This is window display 101. This is advertising 101. This is all of that. So you naturally came to that point where you're like, okay, to compete, I have to tell people why they need to stop at my booth without me being able to say a word. It's all imagery.
Yes. Yeah. And there's that element definitely at play. There's also, I decided myself, I was like, okay, I have to be even just a little bit more salesy as well, because I think it's easy when you go to a trade show to kind of sit and just kind of be more passive and let people come to you. But when you are selling books are an active sell. And so when a person approaches and they look interested, you have to engage them and you have to make a very swift decision on what kind of engagement they want. So if somebody approaches me and I say, hello, how are you? And they kind of look at me, but they look at the books and they want to look at the books, but they don't want me and my face to tell them about the books. Right. I have to back off. I got pretty good at making decisions about how to interact with people. And sometimes those decisions are wrong. Sometimes I'm too excitable at a person and then that scares them away. But you have to decide how to interact with a person immediately. And if that's back away, then, I'll just be like, fantasy is here. Sci-fi here.
Wearing 12 different hats, trying to sell a book as the writer, as the publisher, as the salesperson, and as the marketer, all at one little table that you've paid, possibly several $100s for, depending on the convention and the comic convention, right?
Yeah.
Depending on the location. So that's a lot. That's a lot to do.
Yeah, it is. It is. But it's something that you learn with practice. And I think that, I am actually, I don't know, you probably can't tell, I am actually more introverted naturally. But I do think that an extroversion or people skills, these can be learned with a lot of practice. And because of my performing experience and my journalism experience, my journalism schooling to an extent, I kind of learned that I can talk to people. It's okay for me to engage in, a little bit of small talk, but like useful small talk to kind of put a person at ease and let them know that this is an okay place for you to be. And if you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. Like, you can come into my space and you can touch the books and you can read the books. Like, that's all good to me. Because if I have a person at my booth reading the books, like really like being very thoughtful, then another person is going to come. Because, especially the more introverted person, they don't necessarily want to approach if there's nobody there. And especially
Nobody
if
the first person on the dance floor. That's right.
yeah,
Not
especially if I'm like kind of aggressive. I can be a little bit aggressive. Like if I'm trying to
get excited about, and I'm not an introvert, I think we all know this, but an introvert gets very excited about talking about what they're passionate about. Then they can open up. They can open up when they're in the right place. You're already a writer and a reader yourself. You're talking to people who are interested in the same subject matter that you're selling. And I don't know if it's statistically true, but the idea is that people who read sci-fi and fantasy, we have a higher introvert percentage in our population than not. I don't know if that's actually scientifically true, but that's
right.
what perception is. So I think that you're right on track there, with what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So, you gotta learn how to read people or at least like recognize body language cues from people and just sort of make a decision about whether or not to engage or not engage. And the people who want to engage with you, they will ask you questions. Like, believe me.
Oh, yes, we will. We will. We'll be like, I don't care that you don't want to talk to me. We're going to talk. Yeah, that's terrible, but we do it. We try not to. I try to learn body language too. So all of this has come to you saying, you know what, I can help other people do this, because you obviously learned the hard way. You've already learned all the tough ways to do it, the mistakes to make. So you're trying to make that easier for other writers from your publishing company and your press. So how are you doing that? How are you going to be helping other people and, bringing them to the same place you are without all that growing pain?
Yeah. So all of this, as I continued to do trade shows and blog about it, my blog kind of got the attention of my local community, and people I didn't know started coming up to me at trade shows or emailing me being like, this is a really good resource. Like, what you are doing, nobody is really, doing this in this way. And it's really great that you're sharing all this, because it's part review of the show, but it's like, here's my experience. And it's even part travel blog in a sense, because I'm like, I went to this place and here are all the funny, weird things that happened to me. And here's some weird things that people said. So people kind of started looking forward to and recognizing that I was putting information out there. So what I started to do in October during the pandemic, I created a new blog where I will be actually writing specifically more about my book marketing journey and also book publishing and kind of how-tos and just like a personal perspective on here's how I approach doing this marketing campaign, and here's how it went, and here's what I'll do next time, and here's what you can do to market your books. So that's at cmarshallpublishing.com. And I'm also in the middle of creating a new training for new writers, new authors who maybe you've just written a book and you've published it, and now you're like, what? Now what do I do?
It's so easy. I'll just get Amazon to put it all over everything. That's not that easy, right?
Right. Exactly. And I think like it's just so overwhelming especially when you are self-publishing, you're doing it yourself. Like, there's a lot of information out there on, start a podcast, be active on social media, do this, do that. And you can do all these things and potentially get a result, but you also have to be incredibly strategic with what you're doing and actually think about it, because you can launch a book and post about it on social media and then be like, oh, nobody did anything. But like, you posted on social media once.
Nobody knows hashtags, and nobody knows what the algorithm is, and nobody knows that you have to have people engage, right? There's so much to it. That's the point of this podcast. I want to educate people on the time and the strategy that's necessary. Yeah.
Right.
And when you're bootstrapping it, when you're starting out, you have to know some of that to get anywhere.
Yes. And also to add to that, as a creative person, and when you're doing it all by yourself, like, it's a lot of work to make the thing, like, creatively, and then produce the thing, and then market and sell the thing. Like, these are all different kind of areas of expertise that you kind of have to get a little bit good at.
Yes.
And
it's your baby. That thing you wrote, that make the thing, is your baby. And you're like, why doesn't anybody want my baby? But also, don't take my baby. Yes, it's a terrible, terrible thing as a creative.
yes.
You have to have that mindset. If you don't know how to switch mindsets, if you just want to be a creative, you do have to learn a little. And I would say, from my standpoint, better to start out focusing on one thing and learn how to do that one thing well before you try to just, throw that out to a podcast and to Instagram and to social media and to this and that. Just like you just said, it's too much.
Yes.
Because that's overwhelming for someone who doesn't know it, if you don't have someone who can do it for you.
Yes, exactly. And also, to add to that, I would say that it's okay, like, to have different seasons of your work. This is something that I'm trying to work on for myself. As an ambitious person, I just want to do everything all at once yesterday, like, get her done.
Right.
And I set all these really large goals for myself, and then I get really disappointed when it doesn't happen. But in reality, there's only so much time in a day. I only have so much energy. So I'm trying to be really intentional now with how I break up and batch my time. So, for example, right now, I am actually coming to the end of a creative season. I've spent all of June creating the next season of my young adult fantasy serial podcast called Wing Torn, which the first episode of season 3 comes out July 8th. So I've spent all of June making this and being really intentional about it. And I actually think it's even better because of it. Like, this season is going to be so great. I'm actually, like, really excited about it. And that's kind of rare for me, sadly, because you get to a point where you get stuck in a loop of create, sell. And once you're done making the thing, like, I often don't even want to, like, look at it, because I'm like, I've spent so much time, like, I'm over this right now. And that's the other thing. Like, you can spend so much time creating a thing that you get kind of burnt out on it. And then you don't want to think about marketing.
Stories that the muse is like, okay, we're done with you. And then you're like, I don't want to think about this anymore. It's like my colleagues and friends who do a lot of, whether it be marketing or creating art or products that have to do with the holidays, they're doing it in June. They're doing it in May because it's got to be ready. If they're designing stamps or designing paint or designing anything. And by the time you get to Thanksgiving, they're like, do we have to do the holidays? Because I've kind of already done them.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go to Bermuda. Thanks. We'll see you in New Year. Yeah, because that's a lot. It burns you out on whatever you're doing, no matter how much you love it. Burnout is a real thing for business owners and creatives.
Yeah. And I actually, like, at the end of 2019, I did, like, a ton. I did 4 large Christmas craft markets. Now, craft markets are like a step up from Comic-Cons. They are really intense because you're competing, you're there with a lot of artisans who basically picture as if Etsy came to life at a trade show, like very boutique, chic items that people are going to buy for like Christmas. So,
It's like
that's a
before
whole.
Etsy existed, we had craft fairs, and now Etsy is where craft fair people go when they're not selling at craft fair.
Yeah.
Imitating Etsy, right?
Right. So that's even like another evolution that I had to do. I had to be like, okay, I need to like actually fit in with this crowd and look even better than I was doing before. So I started doing those. So in 2019, just before, pandemic, I did 4 of these very large Christmas craft shows, and it went really well. But I was traveling, literally zipping across the country, like Calgary to Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, to Edmonton, to Winnipeg. So it's like going like in a triangle almost.
For people
And
who see you, she's showing me with her hands the map of the triangle.
yes. Again, you will be quizzed later.
Just remember the geography quiz, people. Yes.
Yes. So I was doing all this. I also, my grandmother passed away during that time. I got sick because I was traveling and doing all these shows, and I'm very like meticulous. I will have hand sanitizer. I take vitamins with me because I'm touching people's money. I'm shaking hands with people. So I'm pretty meticulous with all of that, even pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
But I got sick, and I was literally, by the final show, which was also in Winnipeg, I felt like I was like dissociating from my body. Like I was literally, my internal voice was like, am I a person? Like, why am I doing this? And yet like my face and my words were still doing sales. It was like it's automatic by that point. But I was
a little robotic at that point. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Robotic, and just like also kind of checked out in one sense, because I was so sick, and I was just like, I don't want to be here really, but I do want to be here. It's sort of this weird of two minds, because I would then go back to the place I was staying, and I would be looking up on the internet, where are the other biggest craft shows? What's the next biggest craft show that I could do? It's like, what are you doing? You're like so sick.
Clinics, right?
So I did end up burning out, and then the pandemic happened, so I was forced to stop, which is
a big thing for a lot of ambitious people. It's like, well, now what do I do? And they all went online, right?
Yes, and I have these online skills because I'm a freelance publishing person. I do editing, or I don't do as much editing and design anymore. But I have all those skills because I do it for myself. I do a lot of website work and podcast editing, anything technical and creative surrounding the publishing space. I know how to do it because I do it for myself and I do it for other people. And so the transition to being at home and being online was not like a huge jump. And I had actually spent a lot of 2019, because I was starting to feel kind of like, what is next for me? Like I've got this trade show thing down. What is next for me? So I was sort of investing in like, how can I be better online? Like, how can I take what I did with trade shows and put that into my online profiles and space and level those up? So I'm kind of on that journey now, and that's sort of why I started this blog.
Whether you wanted to be or not, but that's a new skill set. It's a skill set you needed anyway. It's a skill set you already had, and now you're improving it, because until you can get back on the road, which is going to be a little slower in Canada than in some other places, then this is something you're still dealing with.
Yeah.
So tell me about the training you're working on for other writers. Tell me when that's. I know that's in the funnel right now, in the queue. So tell me where you are with that, because I think people are going to be excited, and depending when they're listening to this, they'll be able to jump right on that.
Yeah. So it's sort of based on a presentation that I gave a few years ago that I called "Book Marketing is Easy and Everything is Fine and Other Lies."
I love that. A+ on the hook, man.
I'm not calling it that for this, but essentially it's about the mindset shifts and kind of part stories about me like marketing and selling my books, but put into 3 different mindset shifts that I went through to actually become excited about marketing, because I know how to make things, I know how to like produce things, and I know how to sell things, but marketing is quite different.
Yes.
It's different than
Why I haven't
sales.
done it. Yes.
and
Months to
and
go find out how to love it. Right.
yeah, so you have to think about it in a very different way. And you have to think about it before you make your product. You have to think about it while you're making it. And then you have to execute, like, during and after the product is made. So
Every writer, every starting out writer right now, an artist that's listening to this is now saying, because I've heard this over and over again, no, my art, it's way above that. It's way above the atmosphere above something like, selling and marketing. And, don't make me come down to that level because I am esoteric and special. And everybody's work is esoteric and special. And we all love it. We all love you. So what I want to express that is that you still have to think about, like you said, marketing ahead and in the middle. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. Find somebody who can, help you with it. But you're making a good point. You have to at least consider it. You don't have to change your story for it, but you have to consider it. At least I don't think so. You tell me if I'm wrong. I know people who say, well, I don't want anybody editing my work, so I'm going to self-publish. And that's great. Do it. Maybe it's fantastic. Maybe people will love it. And I know people who have gotten away with it. Maybe they're good enough editors themselves. You edit your work, right?
Oh yeah, you definitely should hire an editor, even if you are self-publishing your stuff.
Right. But there's things that you won't catch because you don't know. I mean, I have a whole podcast that you can go back and listen to if you're curious, with Joni Avini, who is my proofreader and one of my good friends. And, she'll tell you that, editing is 90% of writing. You write once and then you rewrite and you rewrite and you rewrite and you Am I wrong? I mean, this is
you are right. You are right.
Copywriting. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm sorry, I got off on that because it's such an important point. But so you're getting into the training and you're going to be telling people what you've learned. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And so essentially, I want to take people from, and by people, I mean new writers, new authors, or authors who maybe they have a couple of books, but then they're just kind of like, I don't know. Like, I think one piece of advice that is often thrown around to authors that has a grain of truth in it is, the best way to market your book is by writing another book, which is not entirely wrong, especially in the fiction space. Like and as I wrote more books, people paid more attention to me, but I kept showing up at a place. So that's another factor with new things. So people kind of were like, oh, she's here again, and she's here again. And
I got to stop you there again, because you just made an amazing marketing point, and that is, no, you can't buy one ad for 1 month on a website or in a publication and then say, nobody came, we're going to cut it off. You have to do it 3 to 6 months at a time, because if they don't see you over and over again, you're never going to make it into their consciousness long enough to stick. And what you just said, doing that, but showing up in person.
Yeah, exactly. And even to that point, like I've been doing, for example, I've been doing the Calgary Comic-Con since 2014, 2015, and I would do it every year until like 2019. And I would have people come up to me and be like, oh, you're here this year. And I would be like, but I was here every year. Like, just because you haven't seen me in 3 years doesn't mean that I wasn't here. But, that's kind of on me in one sense, because, I wasn't as aggressive with being like, hey, I'm going to be at the Calgary Expo at this booth at this time. And, I might put that on my social once, but that doesn't mean that people are going to see it there.
No, you're completely at the mercy of the algorithm. If they're not on your email list where you control the conversation or on your website, then there's no guarantee that the right people are going to see it. And even if they do, they may not connect that with you at a table because they remember the table and they're still in the consideration phase. And how many things have we done? All of us have done this going, I really want to see that person again at this craft fair or this convention, or I really want to get that next time I see them. And 3-4 years go by, but you don't feel like it's 3-4 years. And then you're like, oh, they're here this year. Let me finally buy that book.
Yeah. And that's happened
to you.
too.
It's been like, oh, I vaguely remember saying I want to buy that book last year, but it's actually been 3 years. So that happens to a lot. So that consideration phase of the sales happens over a long time for a fair or a Comic-Con, right?
Yes. Yeah. It can. Absolutely. I have people who will buy right then and there, but then I will have people who will come to me every year. They will find me, or they'll remember that I exist when they see me, and they'll look at the books and they're like, oh, I don't know, this year might be the year, but they will come back every year until
they're saving their budget for the collectibles section, right?
Yes. Yeah. Or an autograph from, whatever celebrity.
Right. But now we need to get autographs from you, right? So exactly. So these Comic Cons are not just about books; they're not just about comics anymore, especially the big ones, right? You're competing with entire casts of famous TV shows like The Walking Dead, which I think was a comic, right? Because I'm not a comic person. So.
Yes, it was originally a graphic novel. I think it was a series. I never got into The Walking Dead myself. I know a lot of people are
I didn't either. I wanted to. It just didn't catch my attention. I know that's a controversial opinion. Sorry. I don't like that kind of thing. It just never caught my eye. However, what we can hope for is that Claire's books become a TV show, and then she's up there with the entire cast as the writer, right? So we'll get there.
That would be fun.
We'll sell those movie rights just from this podcast. Everybody listening from Hollywood should pay attention. So, you've been so generous with your time. Tell us how to find you, how people can find your books, how people can find your, your upcoming training, where to, bookmark you so they can watch for that, or if they're listening to this later, get on that bus.
For sure. So my young adult science fiction and fantasy publishing imprint is called Faery Ink Press. That's Faery, Faery, Ink, I-N-K, Press, PRESS.com, faeryinkpress.com. So that's where you can find my books. You can buy from me direct. If you purchase from me from that website, you are buying from me direct, and you will get signed copies to your door. You can also find them, on Amazon, and you can some bookstores you can order them into. It just might take a little bit longer. So if you want signed copies, buy from me directly. I also have my book marketing publishing blog, which is just cmarshallpublishing.com. And on there, you will find the link to the free training that I will be offering. And my socials are, I'm at Faery Ink Press on everything. And I'm at C Marshall Pub on everything that matters. So.
That's right. And Marshall is like the AMP people, Marshall, correct?
Correct.
And
yes.
It's Clare Clare if you're trying to Google her. So
yes.
Listen, I always say I understand. I got that kind of name. So yours is easy, but just a slightly different spelling than maybe people will assume. So I'm so excited we got to talk about this, and we'll definitely have to talk more about this in the future when the training starts. Come on back so we can talk more about it. Anything else you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I get a lot of parents and guardians and adults coming to me saying, my daughter or my granddaughter or my child wants to be a writer. What should I do? Or what advice would you give? And it's really tough because I have so much advice to give. But I do think that one, you should be encouraging of the talent and, take them to writers' festivals, get them in a writers group or community, give them a space if they haven't already found a space or community so that they can practice putting their writing out there in a safe way. I would also say that this is a lifelong commitment for me. This is a lifelong commitment to writing and publishing and putting my books out there. And that's a lot, and I recognize for some writers writing is a part-time hobby, and that's fine too. So definitely encourage skills that are complementary to writing that will help them and give their writing, the only word that's coming to right now is more flavor, but makes them have a broad worldly experience. And that will inform their writing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of young adult novels and a lot of writing from the next generation about being stuck in the house. But, they're going to be like, we don't know what else to write this dystopian because we've already lived it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
We're all told to wear masks and stay home. I don't understand. So, yeah, it's true. It's going to be a whole new world. That was excellent advice. I wish that, everyone could hear that about their creative kid, no matter what their creativity is and no matter what their passion is, because that should be something that applies to every passion. If your kid wants to grow up to be a marketer, and I do encourage that, please do. Now, actually, my joke, Claire, is that I used to love Bewitched because I wanted her ability to clean the house by wiggling her nose. And I actually taught myself to wiggle my nose a little bit when I was a kid. And I wanted Darren's job. I wanted to be an advertising guy. I didn't even know his Corvette was cool at that point. It was convertible, but I wanted to be an advertising guy because it looks so much fun. So I think that if you're encouraging your kid to be a writer, finding community, finding a safe space is such an important thing people don't realize. And some kids don't want to do that, but you can find writing festivals to bring them to so they can see how it's done. I love that. Great advice. So thank you so much. This was so much fun. I loved it. And
me too. I'm so glad that you invited me to be here.
I really am. I'm glad that we connected. And everybody go check out our books, check out our training, and we'll talk to Claire again, I'm sure. So have a great day, marketers and magicians.
Wow, another fantastic conversation done. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Don't forget that all the links mentioned will be in the show notes at lizasivekmarketing.com. And while you're there, if you're a business owner whose marketing is on life support, check out the Your Virtual Marketing Department offer and take the Marketing Health Report quiz for free. For less than the cost of a full-time hire, we can take your marketing from frustrating to lead generating with an entire marketing team. So check that out, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Marketing Myths and Magic, part of the Xvadio Podcast Network. You can find us at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.